My dad said, family helps family. So I closed the account they lived off. So 3 weeks before Christmas, my sister dropped a bomb on me. No hi, no how are you, just a text that said, hey, can you cover Ben's tuition this semester? It's only 18 grand. Only, like it was a grocery bill. I actually laughed when I read it. Out loud. Sitting at my desk, coffee in hand, mid-Zoom call. My coworker thought I'd just heard a joke. But the real joke was my life. Because I knew she was dead serious. My name's Maya Bennett, 33, software engineer from Portland, Oregon. No kids, no husband, steady job, small apartment, and a cat named Murphy, who's the only male I actually trust. People hear that and assume I'm living the dream. Peace, freedom, no drama. But in my family, peace just means you're available. See, I'm the youngest, the responsible one, the one who made it. My sister Caroline got pregnant at 21, dropped out of college, and has been finding herself ever since. My parents call her our free spirit. Translation, our problem child that Maya will eventually fix. When that text came through, I replied with just 2 words, not happening, and then I put my phone face down thinking that was the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. 3 days later, I got a call from my mom. Her tone was syrupy sweet. That kind of fake nice people use before asking for something big. Honey, your sister's just under a lot of stress. Ben's a good kid. We just thought, since you're doing so well, maybe you could help a little. It's family. There it was. The word that kills boundaries faster than anything else. Family. I said I'd think about it. What I meant was hell no, but in my house saying no means you've declared war. That night, I got a message from a friend who goes to the same country club as my dad. She said she overheard him talking after his morning round of golf. He'd said, don't worry, Maya will pay, she always does. That's her role. Her role. Those 2 words sat in my chest like a brick. Not her choice, not her kindness, just role. Like I'd been cast in a play I never auditioned for. I wish I could say I confronted him right then, but I didn't. I just sat there at my kitchen table, scrolling through old bank statements and realizing how many times I'd helped without even being asked. Rent when Caroline got behind. A car repair here, medical bills there. It added up to more than $50,000. $50,000. And they still thought I owed them more. You know that moment when something inside you quietly snaps? Not loud, not dramatic. Just this calm clarity that says, enough. That's where I was. The next morning, I walked into work, smiled through meetings, wrote code like everything was normal. But inside I was planning, because if they saw me as their personal ATM, maybe it was time to close the account. Still, part of me hoped I was wrong. That maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. That my family couldn't possibly see me that way. But then the universe, or maybe karma, decided to confirm it. That weekend, my dad invited me to lunch at this little diner we used to go to when I was a kid. I thought, maybe he wants to apologize. He didn't. He waited until the waitress poured our coffee and then said, totally casual, your mom told me you're thinking about helping Caroline. That's good. It's what family does. I stared at him. You mean what I do? He looked up, annoyed, like I'd interrupted the script. You don't have kids, Maya. You don't have a mortgage. You're the one with the easy life, helping your sister. It's just fair. Fair. That word hit harder than I expected. I sat there nodding like a good daughter, while inside I was screaming. I realized they didn't see me as a person anymore, just as a resource, the family's safety net. When the check came, Dad slid it toward me like it was tradition. Old habits die hard, I guess. I paid it, not because I wanted to, but because I already knew it would be the last one. Driving home, I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The radio was playing some Christmas song about family and forgiveness, and I just laughed. One of those bitter, exhausted laughs that don't sound human. That was the night I'd made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let them walk into their own lesson. And when they did, they'd never see it coming. The funny thing about silence is how loud it can get once you stop playing along. After that lunch with my dad, I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't text a single word back to anyone. I just went quiet. And in my family, silence doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. So yeah, I was plotting. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started digging through old bank statements, Venmo logs, every small favor I'd done for Caroline. Rent, braces for Ben, her emergency car battery. It added up to more than 52 grand. I stared at that number so long my coffee went cold. $52,000, and she still thought I owed her more. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to yell or explain myself anymore. I'd just stop feeding the beast. First move, I called my bank and removed Caroline as an authorized user. The woman on the phone asked if I wanted to notify her. I laughed. Oh, she'll find out. Next, my car insurance. That old Toyota she'd been driving for 3 years, under my name. I took her off the policy so fast I could practically hear her next fender bender already coming. And yes, a small ugly part of me smiled. Then I called my dad's accountant and told him I was taking my name off their emergency contact list. Maya, he said, are you sure? I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, I made pasta, poured myself a glass of cheap red wine, and opened a fresh spreadsheet titled, Reclaiming My Sanity. Column A was the list of things I'd paid for. Column B was how much each had cost. Column C was the lesson learned. Example. Mom's hospital bill, $1,800. Love doesn't mean debt. It sounds corny, I know, but it helped. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. When Caroline texted me a photo of the sparkly red dress she'd bought for Christmas dinner, I replied, Looks great, you'll steal the show. She sent back a heart emoji. Meanwhile, I was ordering 3 crisp white envelopes online, the kind used for checks. Inside, I planned to slip something better than money. My coworker Jake noticed something was up. He's the type who eats lunch at his desk and talks too much about baseball. You've been smiling weird lately, he said. What's up? I told him. Let's just say I'm doing some financial spring cleaning. He laughed. In December, I raised my cup. Exactly. By midweek, I'd even taken Murphy, my cat, to the vet for a microchip update. Not for him, for me. It hit me that if I disappeared tomorrow, my family would know exactly where to find me. So, new number, new address for billing, new P.O. box, a clean slate, one small form at a time. Still, there was a flicker of guilt. That old reflex that whispers, You're being selfish. It came when Mom called, her voice soft as ever. Your sister's planning the dinner menu. She's so excited you'll be here. We just want this Christmas to feel normal again. I bit my tongue, because what she really meant was, we want you to pretend nothing happened. I said, Sure, Mom, I'll bring dessert. After the call, I sat on the couch with Murphy in my lap, scratching behind his ears. We're not going to war, I told him. We're just closing the gates. He blinked at me like he understood. Maybe he did. I kept up the act for 2 weeks. Group texts with my family. I answered everyone with cheerful emojis. Caroline posted about family love on Facebook. I even liked it. To anyone else, I looked like the same old reliable Maya. Inside, though, I'd already built my exit plan. Then something small but satisfying happened. Caroline called one night, furious. My gas card got declined, she snapped. You need to fix that. I said, all innocence. Oh, I didn't realize there was an issue. Must have been a glitch. The silence on the line was pure gold. She hung up without a word. That was the moment I knew I had her attention. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about boundaries, about teaching people how to treat me. I used to think standing up for yourself meant shouting louder. Turns out, it just means turning off the tap. A week before Christmas, I sat by my window, watching the rain smear against the glass, Portland gray and soft as always. I thought about the coming dinner, the fake smiles, the glances, the unspoken script where I'd swoop in and save the day again. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel dread. I felt calm, like someone who knows the ending before the story starts. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my sister's old messages, every demand, every guilt trip, every "you're the only one who can help." Then I deleted them all. Every single one. My screen went blank. And somehow that blank screen looked like peace. The last thing I did that night was slip those 3 white envelopes into my purse. From the outside, they looked like gifts. Maybe in a way they were. Because what I was about to give them wasn't money, it was clarity. And clarity, I'd learned, is the most expensive thing you can ever buy. Christmas Eve came faster than I expected. Portland was soaked in rain that felt more like a warning than weather, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every breath taste like endings. I baked cookies that morning, partly because Mom would ask if I didn't, partly because I needed something normal to hold on to. Murphy sat by the window like a tiny guard cat, while I packed the 3 white envelopes into my purse. From the outside, I probably looked calm. Inside, I was fire wrapped in silk. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that night, everything looked the same. The flickering reindeer lights, Dad's truck parked slightly crooked, the smell of cinnamon and ham floating from the open window. The house had always looked warm from the outside. Inside, though, warmth came with conditions. Mom greeted me with that too bright smile she wears when pretending everything's fine. "You made it, honey," she said, kissing my cheek. Caroline appeared seconds later, late as always, wearing that red dress she'd bragged about. She looked me up and down with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You look cozy," she said. I smiled back. "You too, like a walking candy cane." Dinner was a performance. Everyone played their part. Mom fussed over the food. Dad told his usual stories about how hard it was back in his day. Caroline kept dropping hints about Ben's college plans, each one more obvious than the last. "It's crazy how expensive dorms are," she said, glancing at me. I nodded. "Yeah, it's wild." Silence. Then she laughed a little too loudly. "But I'm sure it'll work out, it always does." I poured more wine. "Sure does." Halfway through dessert, Dad cleared his throat, the family cue for time to guilt someone. He lifted his glass. "Here's to family," he said, pausing just long enough to make it sound like a trap. "To generosity, to tradition." His eyes found mine across the table. I felt Caroline's smirk before I even saw it. She leaned back, crossing her arms like she'd been waiting for her cue. "So, Maya," she began sweetly. "About Ben's tuition." I cut her off before she could finish. "Actually," I said, setting my fork down, "I brought something for you." The room went still. I pulled one of the envelopes from my purse and slid it across the table toward her. She looked at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Oh, Maya, you didn't have to." She tore it open before I could blink. Her smile froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. She read the words out loud without meaning to. "This year, I'm giving gifts only to those who don't expect them. I'm also reclaiming what's mine. The car, the card, and the control. Merry Christmas." The sound that came out of her was half laugh, half gasp. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" she snapped, waving the paper like a flag. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. "It means the car insurance expires in 5 days, the credit card's canceled, and you'll handle your own bills from now on." Mom's hand flew to her chest. "Maya, not on Christmas." "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "this is the perfect time. Because this is when you all expect the most." Dad's face turned red. "You're being cruel," he said. "This family has always helped each other." I met his eyes. "Help, Dad, or enable?" Caroline pushed her chair back, her face pale and furious. "You've lost your damn mind. After everything I've done for you." I laughed softly. "Everything you've done for me, please. You've treated me like an ATM with emotions." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You always come crawling back." I stood smoothing my dress. Not this time. For a second, nobody moved. Then Mom started crying, the kind of cry that's half guilt, half performance. Dad muttered something about ungrateful children. Ben, poor kid, just stared at his plate. I looked at him and softened. "Hey, none of this is about you, okay?" He nodded, eyes wide, caught between loyalty and understanding. Caroline stormed off, slamming her bedroom door so hard the ornaments on the tree rattled. Mom followed, sobbing. Dad poured himself another drink and refused to look at me. I sat there for a moment, finishing my wine, the Christmas lights blinking behind me like they were mocking the whole idea of peace on earth. When I finally stood to leave, I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and said quietly, "Merry Christmas." Nobody answered. Outside, the rain had turned to snow, thick and silent. It gathered on my windshield like forgiveness I didn't owe anyone. Driving home, I felt something strange, calm, not joy, not triumph, just this deep, quiet peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop apologizing for existing. My phone buzzed nonstop the next morning, missed calls, guilt texts, the usual family fireworks. I didn't read a single one. I just watched the snow fall outside my window, my coffee steaming in my hand, and thought, that's the thing about boundaries. They only hurt the people who used to benefit from breaking them. And God, did it feel good to finally stop bleeding for people who mistook kindness for weakness. The fallout hit faster than I thought it would. The morning after that Christmas dinner, my phone looked like it was on life support. 12 missed calls, 17 texts, 2 voicemails, and 1 email from my mom titled, "You went too far." I didn't open a single one. I just sat there in my kitchen, sipping coffee and letting Murphy curl up in my lap, while Bing Crosby sang about a white Christmas that felt more like a silent battlefield. For the first time in my life, my family wasn't speaking to me. and it was blissfully quiet. But peace never lasts long in my family. By New Year's, the whispers had started. A coworker pulled me aside at the office, awkwardly rubbing his neck. "Hey, just a heads up," he said. "Someone told HR you were under investigation for an inappropriate relationship." My stomach dropped. He lowered his voice. "Apparently your sister's been talking. She said you were fired from your last job for sleeping with your boss." I laughed because it was either that or cry. "Well," I said, "guess I should thank her for the free pee." That night, I scrolled through Facebook. Caroline had posted one of those vague, guilt-baiting statuses. Some people forget where they came from. Money changes hearts. The comments were full of sympathy. I didn't reply, but I did screenshot everything. Things got uglier after that. Someone mailed a letter to my apartment complex's management claiming I was running a side business out of my home. My lease renewal got flagged. A neighbor told me she'd seen a man lurking near my car late one night, watching my windows. I didn't need to guess who sent him. Caroline's boyfriend, Derek, was the type who thought intimidation counted as loyalty. I filed a police report and a restraining order the next morning. The officer, a woman around my age, gave me this long, steady look as she filled out the form. "Family?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah," she said. "It's always family." I wish I could say I broke down or yelled or confronted them, but honestly, I didn't. I went cold instead. It was like my brain switched to survival mode. Logical, distant, calculating. Every boundary I'd drawn, I reinforced with documentation, passwords, locks, and legal paper. I even moved my savings into a new bank under a different branch. I wasn't running away, I was cutting off the infection. 2 weeks later, my mom showed up at my office. No call, no warning, just walked right in like she owned the place. My boss texted me, "There's an older lady here insisting she's your emergency contact." I walked out to the lobby, and there she was, hair perfectly done, fake pearls, eyes red from crying. She held out an envelope like it was a peace offering. "Sweetheart, we just need to protect you," she said, handing it over. Inside was a document labeled Power of Attorney, my name, her signature, Caroline's handwriting filling in the rest. My chest went tight. I looked at her and asked, calm as I could manage, "You forged my signature?" She flinched. "It's just paperwork, honey. It's for your safety. We thought—" "No," I interrupted. "You didn't think. You planned." I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't stop. "You tried to take my money, my credit, and now you're trying to take my name?" The receptionist was staring. My mom looked mortified, whispering, "Don't make a scene." I smiled. "Oh, Mom," the scene made itself. I walked her out of the building without another word, ripped that paper in half right in front of her, then let the pieces fall into a trash can by the parking lot. She whispered, "You'll regret this." I said, "No, I'll finally live because of this." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking like a metronome for my patience running out. That night, I booked a one-way flight to Denver. A friend from college had offered me a position at her startup months ago, and I'd brushed it off at the time. Now it felt like the universe had just sent me a lifeboat. I packed only what fit into 2 suitcases. No family heirlooms, no Christmas photos, nothing that smelled like obligation. Before I left, I wrote one last email to my lawyer. If they contact me again, I want full documentation. Then I turned my phone off. The day I left, the sky was that kind of pale gray that makes everything look frozen in time. My dad's truck was parked outside my building. I saw his outline in the driver's seat. My first instinct was fear, then pity. I walked past him without slowing down. He didn't roll down the window, didn't even look at me. That's when I knew it was really over. On the flight to Denver, I stared out the window as the plane lifted off, Portland shrinking beneath me. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt still for the first time in years. The city disappeared into clouds, and I whispered to myself, "They can't reach me up here." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, unpacking, and new beginnings. I found an apartment downtown with huge windows and no ghosts. My coworkers were kind, curious, but never intrusive. No one expected anything from me except to show up and be myself. One night, my new friend Rosa brought over pizza and wine. "You look lighter," she said. I laughed. I guess cutting off emotional vampires will do that. But sometimes, when it got quiet, I'd catch myself checking my phone, half expecting another guilt text, half missing the noise I'd known my whole life. I realized trauma can be comfortable when it's familiar. That was the hardest part. Not leaving them, but learning not to crave the chaos. Then one afternoon, my lawyer called. "You'll want to hear this," she said. "Your sister tried to access your credit file again. We stopped it, but it's officially fraud now." I just sat there letting the words settle. Then I said, "Okay, file it." That was the day I stopped being scared of them, because they'd already thrown everything they had, and I was still standing. When I walked home that night, Denver's air was crisp and bright. Christmas lights were still up along the street, twinkling like tiny second chances. I thought about all the times I'd bought those lights for other people. Now I was finally walking under them for myself. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation, and it felt like breathing clean air after years of smoke. 6 months later, Denver finally felt like home. My mornings started with sunlight cutting across my apartment floor, the sound of the espresso machine hissing, and Murphy meowing like he paid rent. I'd walk to work through the crisp air, passing strangers who didn't know me, didn't expect anything from me. And that anonymity, God, it was healing. No guilt, no constant phone buzzing, no "your family, you owe us," just me. For the first time, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's chaos. I was building something new from the ground up. One Sunday morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "They're sorry." My heart did that old stupid skip, the kind that comes before disappointment. It was from Ben, my nephew. He was 19 now, in college, finally on his own. His message was short. "Aunt Maya, I know you said you didn't want contact, but Mom's been sick. She told me everything about the money, the credit cards, the lies. She said you were the only one who ever truly helped her. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry." I stared at that email for a long time. My coffee went cold. For years, I'd wanted those words, and now that they'd arrived, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release, like exhaling something I'd been holding in since childhood. Still, a part of me was skeptical. Caroline was a master manipulator. She could turn an apology into an ambush. But this time, it wasn't her voice in my inbox. It was Ben's, and I believed him. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Oregon. I didn't tell anyone except Ben. The drive from the airport felt surreal, like revisiting a ghost town I used to live in. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the porch light was still that same dull yellow, the same wind chime clinking softly in the breeze. Mom opened the door. She looked smaller, fragile in a way that scared me. "You came," she whispered. I nodded. "Yeah, I did." Inside, the air smelled like vanilla candles and hospital disinfectant. Caroline was on the couch, pale but smiling faintly. Dad sat beside her, older somehow, like the weight of pride had finally started costing him. Nobody spoke at first. Then Caroline broke the silence. "I was awful to you," she said simply, "and I knew it. I just didn't think you'd ever stop forgiving me." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Not defiance, not pity, just regret. I sat down across from her. "You didn't just take money," I said softly. "You took my peace. You made me believe love had to be earned." "I know," she whispered, "and I can't fix that, but I'm sorry." There was no dramatic hug, no swelling music moment. Just silence, the honest kind this time. Dad cleared his throat. "You were right about everything," he said. "We raised you to think obligation was love. That's on us." He looked like saying it cost him everything, and maybe it did. I stayed 3 days. We didn't talk about money or who owed who. We just existed. I made dinner one night. Mom told stories about her garden. Dad helped Ben fix an old bike in the garage. For the first time in forever, no one asked me for anything. And that, more than the apology, was what made me realize things had actually changed. When it was time to leave, Ben walked me out to my rental car. He hugged me tight, the kind of hug that means something. "Even if you never come back," he said, "I'm glad you came this time." I smiled. "Me too, kid." As the plane lifted off that evening, the Oregon landscape stretched beneath me. Mountains, rivers, the same old roads that used to lead me back to pain. Now they just looked small. I caught my reflection in the airplane window, calm, older, free. People always say forgiveness is about them, but it's not, it's about you. It's about choosing peace even when they don't deserve it. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not the confrontation, not the final word, but the quiet decision to live a better life without them pulling the strings. When I got back to Denver, my neighbor Rosa was waiting outside my door with a bottle of wine. "So?" she asked, eyes curious. "Was it worth it?" I laughed, unlocking my door. "Yeah," I said. "It was closure, but not the kind I thought I wanted. It was the kind I built myself." We clinked glasses, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of everything I'd survived. Not with bitterness, but gratitude. Because sometimes walking away isn't about leaving them behind. It's about finally walking toward yourself. And that, my friend, is what freedom really feels like. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't cutting ties. It was realizing how long I'd mistaken control for care. I used to believe that being the strong one meant holding everything together, even when it was breaking me apart. But strength isn't endurance, it's boundaries. It's saying, "No, this ends with me." Sometimes walking away doesn't make you cold or heartless. It makes you whole again. My family finally apologized months later, and yeah, I forgave them, but this time on my terms. What I learned is this: love without respect is just manipulation dressed up in nostalgia. You can't heal in the same place that made you sick. And silence isn't peace if it costs your self-worth. It's okay to protect your energy, even from the people who share your blood, especially from them. Because at the end of the day, your life isn't a group project. It's yours to define, rebuild, and live freely. There's an old saying, you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. I'd add, teach yourself that you deserve more than survival. You deserve calm mornings, honest laughter, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. So if you've ever been the dependable one, the fixer, the person who keeps forgiving just to keep the peace, maybe it's time to choose yourself. Because peace that comes from guilt isn't peace at all. If this story hit home, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away to finally find peace? I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to hit like if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more real stories that make you think, feel, and maybe heal a little. Until next time, take care of your heart. You've only got one, and it deserves quiet after the storm.